Welcome to Murder by Nature, where we discuss true crime, mysterious disappearances, and unsolved cases. I'm Jazmin Hernandez, your host. So, there may be some background noise. I'm babysitting right now, but I wanted to make sure that we were able to get this out, because I'll be extremely busy tomorrow when this comes out. And I want to thank everyone for coming in and listening and being a part of this community. We hit a certain amount of listeners, so now you're going to notice that there's some ads that are popping up with Buzzsprout now. It's just going over some other podcasts that are within the Buzzsprout community. And if you like any of them, don't forget to hop over there and listen to it. I've been listening to some of them as I kind of re-listened to these episodes and heard some pretty cool ones that I'm interested in. So we're going to see what happens with that. We've been pretty busy over here. I've been going through so many different cases to kind of just get a grasp on Halloween and how this season plays into the spookiness of everything. And we have a lot of good episodes coming out in the next few weeks. And I'm thinking about even doing an extra one on Halloween night. I think that'd be super fun and rewarding. I love doing these and going through the cases. Sometimes they stick with me and I just sit here and think about all the families that have to go through all of this. But I also think that it's very important to know about these cases and not let their names and their stories go unheard. So that's why I do what I do. But we have a lot of good episodes coming out for this month. So continue to listen and see what we come up with. For this episode, it took place on a Halloween night. Our references for it are oxygen.com, crimeandinvestigation.co.uk, Crypt Chronicles Podcast, Crimes and Coffee Couple, Reddit, Redskins Register, The Muscat Medium, CBS News, Find a Grave for William, Find a Grave for Susan, and Find a Grave for Derek. And with that, we will jump into our episode. Halloween is the time for spooky nights and scary movies, the month that everyone wants to be scared and dress up as their favorite character from movies, shows, or books. It's a time when the air is crisp and the leaves start to change colors. Some might use this opportunity to blend in with the crowd of Halloween celebrators and seek out their own victims for fun, while some take this time as a chance to unleash terror on people who might be the most fortunate crossing their paths that evening. In 2001, Susan Griffith and William Lusky decided it was time to tie the knot and combine their families as one. Susan had 2 children from her previous marriage, and William had 1 son from a previous relationship. They knew with having older children, it might be harder to get the family to combine as one, but it would be worth it in the end. Susan's son, Devin and Derek, warmed up to William very easily. They would hang out and really took a liking to him as a stepfather. But William's son, William Jr., also known as BJ, didn't warm up to Susan in the same way. This caused a lot of conflict within the household. When merging 2 families, it's often hard as the children are older and stuck within their ways, and this is what the Lusky household found to be true. Most of the time, the house was stuck in chaos, with William Sr. having to choose between his wife and his son with their disagreements. As most imagine, BJ was not handling the transition well. He started to skip school and was getting into serious trouble. When the couples merged the family, it was hard for BJ to understand the rules that Susan was attempting to set forth, and he would push his boundaries with her rules a lot of the time. The family tried to bond over combined interest in the outdoors. Susan was an office manager in Northwest Ohio Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee, and William was a retired Air Force veteran. But the one thing that they all shared in common was the love for hunting. The family would spend weekends out hunting and just being within the outdoors. But sadly, that was all about to change. In 2002, issues with BJ's were in full force. William Sr. had to call the police on his son as an argument erupted at the home, with BJ stating he was going to kill himself. When the police arrived, BJ attacked the officers when they were trying to calm him down, and he was arrested and charged with assaulting a police officer. At this time, things went kind of calm, like things started to calm down for a bit, until October of 2004. BJ got into a physical altercation with Susan. He attacked her and was hitting her in the chest. With William Sr. not really knowing what to do or how to handle this, he was struck once again. Then 2 months went by, and the police were called out again to the house for another altercation with Susan and BJ. BJ hit Susan with a cup of coffee and stole her car keys. He was charged with assault and robbery this time, and he was arrested. Now, at trial, the defense stated that BJ was incompetent to stand trial for these charges, and the judge agreed. The case was dismissed. As the family tried to adjust back to a normal routine, William finally reached a breaking point with BJ and kicked him out of the house after he attempted to assault Susan while she was in the shower. In 2007, BJ was hospitalized for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. William knew that the only way he was going to protect his now 18-year-old son was to file for guardianship over him. William knew that this diagnosis would put his son into a very bad position, that people didn't really understand mental health at this time, so he had to do everything possible to help this. He knew that the one thing he can do was put his son somewhere safe and petition the court to allow BJ to move into a halfway house or a group home. With this time at the group home, though, BJ continued to spiral out of control. The cops had to be called on him 3 times within his stay there for physical altercations with the staff, residents, and his father. As things started to calm down, William knew that he needed to repair his strained relationship, and that was starting to form a bond with his son. He decided that he was going to take some time off work and go hunting, just the 2 of them. William packed up his things, and off the pair went to the family's hunting cabin in Carroll County the week before Halloween. When the duo returned on the 30th, the family went to the neighbors for a barbecue and hung out. The gathering went amazing. Everyone was having a great time, and the family was really just starting to get along. As the night came to a close, Susan and William decided that it would be best if BJ just stayed the night instead of driving him back to the group home, since they both had been drinking. BJ didn't usually stay the night at the house with the family due to his violent attacks previously, and they just felt like it was best for one night. Just one night he'll stay there. The party ended around 12 a.m., and everyone else went home. Most of the guests noticed that Susan's boys were not at the party. Neither of them were there. And that didn't seem very odd for them, as BJ and the boys didn't get along very well due to the horrific attacks that BJ did to their mothers throughout the year. The next morning started as any other. Devin stayed the night at his father's house that weekend and woke up on Halloween morning in a rush. He woke up and still needed to go to his mother's house to get ready for church that morning. At around 9:30 a.m., he quickly rushed to his mother's house to change. When he arrived to the house, he felt like something was off. His stepbrother, BJ, was there, and instead of their normal doom and gloom, he was excited and talkative. Devin didn't have much time to think about this, as he was already running late and quickly told BJ bye and rushed out the door. BJ was getting the family's Ford F-150. He was getting it all packed and ready, and he was going to go to the family's hunting cabin in Carroll County. The morning church service ran longer than expected, and Devin had a performance with the church's choir. As the day turned into afternoon, Devin finally made his way back home to unwind. He went into his room and started playing video games before the night's festivities began. It was Halloween night, so they were getting ready to do something. Go trick-or-treating, do something. And it was said that after a few hours, Devin noticed that the house was eerie silent. The kitchen was empty, there was no shower running, and no one was around. And I'll make note here that Devin stated that his mother worked nights most of the time, so it was normal for her to sleep in. It just wasn't normal for her to sleep in this late, and that struck him as very odd. As he made his way through the home, he stumbled upon a gruesome scene. Devin started walking around the house and into his mother's bedroom. He thought maybe they were still asleep or they just didn't feel well. Maybe they got up and went back to bed and they just didn't feel well. As Devin walked into the room, he noticed that they had a red quilt over their heads. Devin tried to wake them by talking to them, but he got no response. He walked over to his mother's side of the bed and began to shake her. No response. As he started to grow extremely nervous, he started to pull down the blanket. Devin noticed that there was a ton of blood on the pillow his mother's head was on. and Devin's first thought was, they're playing some horrible prank. The night before, his parents hosted a Halloween party, and they were trying to be funny maybe, until the shock finally set in and he realized what he was looking at. His mother and stepfather were dead. Devin raced out of the house and called his Aunt Lori. As Lori rushed over to the residence, she called 911, not knowing the scene that she was about to be pulled into. See, all she knew was that her nephew said something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. And she just knew that there was a ton of blood. It is also said in some reports that when Devin raced out of the house, he was hysterical, telling people to call for help. But that was only in one article. In every other article, he calls his aunt. When the police arrived to the home, it was a rural home that sat on over 100 acres, and they started the search of the home. They found Susan Lewowski and William Lewowski murdered in their room. As they continued to search the home, they found Derek Griffith's door was locked. The police found this to be very odd. His door was locked, he wasn't responding back to them, and police kicked down the door to find Derek curled up in the bed facing the wall. He was dead. From the initial investigation, they were able to determine that Derek was bludgeoned to death with a claw hammer. He most likely died within the first few minutes of the first blow. William was shot 5 times in the head, and he was at like a 2 to 1 foot range from the shooting. He was lying in a natural sleeping position. Susan was sprawled out more awkwardly as if she was moved within the time frame, and she was shot 3 times at close range. After further investigation, they found that Susan was sexually assaulted before she was shot. Police were able to see that there was no signs of a struggle, and they determined that the 3 must have been sleeping during these attacks. One thing the police noted was that Derek didn't have any contact with anyone since 3 p.m. the night before. So now if you remember, during the Halloween party, there is some accounts that it was at the neighbor's house and some accounts that it was at their house. But the one thing that people did remember is that Derek wasn't there. And the last known communication that Derek had was at 3 p.m. that day before on the 30th. So it's not known if Derek was murdered the day before and just no one knew. They just thought he was sleeping or he wasn't there, or if he was murdered the same morning. No one really knows. In a matter of hours, Devin's life was taken from him, and his mother and brother were gone. As the police continued to search for clues throughout the house and outside, this is when they stumbled upon a muddy shoe print that led from the pond to the back deck. Police decided to check the pond to see if they were able to find a .22 that was used in the murders. As they went through the investigation, they were able to narrow down that the gun used was a .22. The pond was drained and canine dogs sniffed the entire pond area, but there was no weapon found. With Lori and Devin back at the house, both were certain that BJ had something to do with the murders. They just knew it. Lori told officers that BJ had a lot of trouble with the law and that he threatened Susan before, and that he was all kinds of trouble. She told police that she tried to call that house around 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. after Derek didn't show up for work that day. Derek was supposed to go to her house and work on some stuff with her husband, but he never showed. And that wasn't like Derek to be that way. She also let the police know that the F-150 was missing from the house. Devin told police that when he came home, his stepbrother BJ was at the house acting super weird. He told police that BJ was not normally at the house, and when he is, he's always doom and gloom. But this morning, he was happy and chipper loading up the truck. As police started to search for BJ, they alerted that the nearby communities of this crime, they have so much ground to cover. So they alerted people like, hey, look out for this truck. And that's when Deputy Michael spotted the white Ford pickup truck matching the description of that vehicle. When the officer approached the residence, BJ casually walked out of the brown single-story cabin smoking a cigarette as he leaned against the porch. The deputy immediately drew his gun and told BJ to lay on the ground. The deputy had to hold him at gunpoint until backup arrived to assist with handcuffing BJ. Officers stated that during the initial arrest that they were able to gather evidence that indicated that BJ did this, that he was guilty of killing Susan and Derek. The police were able to locate critical evidence in the family's truck, including blood and the .22 caliber rifle that was used to kill the family. As BJ was being transported to the jail, he was put on suicide prevention. So, as you remember, in the previous years, he threatened to kill himself. He threatened to kill other people. He had a lot of issues with the law, and he was in a group home. They knew that there was something there, so they told him that he needed to be put in a smock, and he refused. Officer Lee Monty instructed BJ towards the smock and touched his shirt and prompted BJ. This ended up enraging him. BJ punched and scratched the officer in the face repeatedly until backup arrived to assist the officer. They advised BJ that if he did not cooperate with them, that they will tase him, and they had to sit there and hold a taser at him. BJ ended up putting on the smock, and even though this assault happened and he was in custody, no charges were ever brought up against it. During the investigation, police struggled to find a motive for the killing. Everything seemed to be okay with the family at that time. There was no issues. BJ and his father were getting along. They were spending quality time together, and the night before, the family had a whole gathering. The timing didn't make sense to the community or the people around the family. But the killings did. See, the killings weren't a shock to them. They just didn't understand what triggered him when he was having such a good time. All of the family and friends knew that BJ was violent, and he was extremely violent towards Susan. So that didn't make much of like, oh no, he did it. It was like, oh, everything seemed to be going fine. What triggered him? In the course of the investigation, the police quickly became aware that just a month before the murders, Susan filed a police report against BJ, claiming that he sexually assaulted her. Police wondered if this was the final straw for William and the relationship that he was having with his son. But the one thing that I want to note here is William took time off of work after this happened, after the police report, took time off of work, got BJ, and went on vacation with him. So I don't know if maybe they were talking about something, or maybe when he came back, maybe Susan wasn't happy that he was there. And William and Susan got into it and BJ snapped. No one really knows that part of it. When investigators searched the house, they noted that the makeup sofa bed in the living room, that it was made. They had made a spot for BJ the night before. Now, one of the neighbors, Michelle, told investigators that she heard what sounded like gunshots at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, October 31st, the morning of the murders. If this is correct, Devin would have been home, unaware that his family had been killed while getting ready for church, speaking with BJ after he already murdered his family. This would have also indicated that BJ allowed Devin to leave the house and live, rather than murdering him as well. It's also possible that the timing could be completely off. BJ asked Devin how long he would be gone, and if so, maybe he murdered them afterwards, after Devin left for church. Devin has came out and said that he feels like BJ only let him live so he can suffer with the pain that he was going through. In November of 2010, BJ was charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts for each person killed. 3 of the counts were for murder with prior calculation and design, and 3 were murder committed in the commission of an agitated robbery. Now, BJ pled not guilty to this. I know there's some reports that said that he pled guilty. No, he pled not guilty at first. After this, 2 evaluations were done, and BJ was deemed competent to stand trial. During a pre-trial hearing on August 12, 2011, BJ pled guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder in exchange for the removal of a possible death penalty. Before his sentencing, without a tear being shed, BJ told the courtroom that filled with those who knew and loved Susan, William, and Derek, that he could not explain why he brutally murdered them on that fateful Halloween. He said, "I love my dad very much, and it makes me feel sick to think every time about what I did. I can't really explain why this all happened, but I think most of it all had to do with my mental illness." BJ's defense attorney said it was ridiculous that his client could be declared legally sane, especially when he had a history of poor mental health. He said it's unknown whether BJ was taking the medication that was prescribed for his schizophrenia disorder on the night of the murders, although he had been drinking alcohol. Clearly, he should have not been provided alcohol, something that is a constant problem in his life, the mixture of alcohol and his mental illness. BJ's sister, Lisa, told the court that her family's lives have been changed forever. We don't just understand how someone can be like this. You see this stuff on TV and think this can never happen to your family. You love someone so much and then they take something away from you. I just don't know how you can do it when he loved you so much. In September of 2011, BJ was sentenced to 3 life sentences in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, the one thing that I want to note here is BJ did have schizophrenia. It's something that was documented, something that he was in a group home for, something he was in and out of jails for, and William did not want to give up on him. He made it very clear, even when people told William that BJ was going to hurt him or that BJ was a risk. William told his friends that BJ would never do that to him. He would never hurt them. And I think that's really sad that you had a father that loved you so much. Like his sister said, he loved you so much. And you did that to him. In September of 2011, like I said, BJ was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. So he got charged. It came out just like how it was. And the judge didn't spend any time wasting that sentencing. He did it immediately. On March 31st, 2015, BJ was found dead in his cell at Ross Correctional Institution in Ohio from a self-inflicted injury. He was 29 years old. Now, before I close this out, I want to go over the victims. A lot of times there isn't much on the victims, but each of these victims has a really extensive find a grave in their obituary. And Devin has spoken out on all of this. He recently just spoke out on it, and I think it's important to give their story. Derek L. Griffin was 23 years old at the time of his death. He was born July 30th, 1987, son of Gary and Susan Griffith. He graduated Oak Harbor High School in 2005, where he had been active in track. He was a second-degree black belt and a member of St. John Angelic Lutheran Church in Oak Harbor. His favorite pastime was spending time on Lake Erie in his sailboat and his father's inflatable dinghy. One friend by the name of Emily said this about him: Derek was one of my best friends in the entire world, and he will be deeply missed by myself as well as everyone who met him. Even if it was for a brief encounter, he never failed at making my day better in the smallest ways. Whenever I needed someone to talk to, he was always right there for me. I'll never forget all of our dumb inside jokes, midnight runs to Wendy's, and the fact that he taught me how to longboard. He had been a huge part of my life and will continue to be. I miss him terribly. I wish more than ever I could see him one last time, but I know that wouldn't be enough. Susan Lowski was born on January 30th, 1964, to Ben and Ida. Susan was the office manager at Northwest Ohio Carpenter, and she was also a member of St. John Angelic Lutheran Church. She enjoyed hunting, camping, and gardening. She had a big heart and was a loving mother, aunt, and friend. Shelley Tommen said on her memorial page, Susan, from the moment you walked into work with Devin, I knew we'd be friends and not just coworkers. I said it when we met and how our boys were the same age and they would be best friends. Little did I know that he would grow up one day to call you mom, and I would think of you as a big sister, not just a coworker. Your joy, laughter, and insight, kindness, and generous heart followed you everywhere you went. It's hard to know that you won't just be a call away about weekend plans or getting an email or anything. You were a good wife to Bill and an awesome mom to not just your kids, but all of them that called you mom, a wonderful friend and sister to all who knew you. William E. Lowski was born May 11th, 1957, to William E. and Shirley. William was a United States Air Force veteran and worked for the Waste Management Company. He, like Susan, enjoyed hunting, fishing, gardening, and being outdoors. He was a loving husband and father, Friends Jake and Nicole said, "Bill, you were an amazing friend to the family. Jake and I will miss your humor and the love you had for us. We will miss that pumpkin patch that you made for Mason and Owen every year. Mason said a prayer for you and Susie Sunday evening. He misses you guys." Now, my thoughts. This case had a lot of different twists and turns. I feel like mental health is something that I take very seriously. And that's one thing that stuck out about this case was the fact that the murderer had an ongoing history of mental health issues. And he was trying to get treatment for them. But as you look through all of the days and the years and everything, he had some issue with Susan. And that issue just kept broiling and broiling and broiling before it was too much, and he took her life. BJ threatened Susan numerous times, threatened to kill her, threatened to do things to her, and that's what happened. And sadly, not just Susan died as a result of whatever he was feeling. From things that I was looking at and researching, BJ had some form of issue with Susan the minute that William and Susan got together. And I mean, he wasn't super young, but his dad and his mom split up. And after that is when Susan came into the picture. And some say that he found it very hard to deal with the rules that Susan put forth for her children and for him. And he didn't agree with them. And that's something that I think started a lot of the spiral. And then as he got older and older and older, it turned into more violent acts. I think when he was kicked out by his father, that he blamed Susan for a lot of that. And that's kind of what transpired all of this. Now, there's a lot of different stories, and Devin has spoken out on all of this and how he feels. And I think one of the saddest things is, out of all the parties involved, Devin's the only one left standing, the only one having to deal with this grief and everything that comes with it. And I think that's very hard as a human to process. He does have his father, and that's who he ended up going with afterwards. But the trauma that he had to feel walking in and knowing that his mother and stepfather and brother were gone in a matter of minutes, and not knowing if they were gone when he came for his jacket and his shirt, or if he was gone later. He doesn't know when it happened. And I think that's very hard. And then kind of it playing back in his head why he was spared. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss, is the survivor's guilt that comes with, why didn't he take me too? One thing I wanted to say in here, I just didn't feel like it was necessary through the story, is in a lot of the articles, it was said that after BJ did all of this and left, that I guess he went to Subway, and that's kind of how they found him in a way. Once the APB went across and it was put out like, oh, look for this person, BJ was caught on Subway's camera getting a sandwich, getting in the truck, and then heading out to the cabin. And it said that when the police came and did everything, that they actually found the sandwich that BJ was going to eat. He never got to eat the sandwich. It was on the table when they were going through the investigation. So I thought that was just a little weird. That brings us to the end of this episode. As always, thank you for listening to Murder by Nature. If you enjoyed our show, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any streaming platform that you're currently on, and be sure to come back next Saturday for our new episode. Until then, I am your host, Jazmin Hernandez. Don't forget to stay safe, don't get murdered or murder people, you lovely humans. I hope you have a fantastic Saturday.